All right, welcome back, everyone. We want to welcome you to Level 1, Session 11. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have a great session planned for you, and I'm going to bring Sherry on right away. Sherry, how are you doing? I know we had that little pre-show. We were talking about the SpaceX launch, so that was really cool.
It's pretty fun when at your job you have to go watch the launch, and I'm sure Orlando remembers a lot of launches that he's got to see go up at Kennedy, and it's just really fun to see those kinds of historical things going on, and actually it's your job to go watch. So we've had a good afternoon. We want to just welcome Orlando. We're so lucky to have him with us today. I think we first met when I was on the exploration solar system exploration subcommittee, NASA headquarters. I think that's the first time, and you were in charge of the solar system. And I was mentioning that last week when I said, "Oh, and our next guest speaker is going to be the guy who's in charge of the solar system." And somebody said, "God's talking? Oh my goodness!" So it's the NASA solar system. We'll put that preference in front of it. And anyway, Orlando brings a wealth of information and experience and expertise to us today. Not only was he in the leadership at NASA headquarters across the planets, including Mars, which we're talking about today. He was actually, I think, started out at Mars and then expanded over the entire 9 planets at the time.
That's right.
And then now he has the extreme honor of actually convening all the review boards for NASA, and his bio has been sent out. And someday, maybe you'll be lucky enough to be at a review, a PDR or a CDR that Orlando has convened for you. That's our goal in terms of getting you ready for this. So anyway, welcome, Orlando. We so appreciate you taking the time out of your busy, crazy busy schedule to come and share with us today. So with that,
Thank you, sir.
I will turn it over to you to go ahead and school all of us in all your good stuff.
Delighted to be here with all of you. Let's see, Dan, you're giving me control of the screen, I presume?
Yeah, so if you click the share button right in the middle of your screen, the bottom middle,
Right.
click share, and then double click your PowerPoint if you have PowerPoint open. And there we go. And then just, there we go. Perfect. We see
You all
it.
can see it?
Yes,
Yep.
we can. Thank you.
That's terrific. So let me give you a little bit of background on the set of slides you're going to see. A while back, before I undertook the task of taking care of a solar system, I was invited quite often to share with other principal investigators and project managers some of the experiences based on my background about what made missions successful. And the focus was roles and responsibilities within a project team. And in particular, what I call the design of a system and the systems engineering, how it fits within that construct. And it is to leave you with one message. I mean, everything you, including what we were just talking about, the Falcon Heavy, NASA missions, small, medium, large, even suborbital kind, are one of a kind opportunities to develop something that hasn't been done before, even though you in some instances may be repeating using the same vehicle, same kind of spacecraft and what have you. The mission in its entirety tends to be something unique and new. So you're constantly pushing the envelope of what is known and including the approaches to how you get it done. We learn, we fold those lessons into whatever next project we may be undertaking. And it's both an honor and it's an incredible challenge because knowing that you're doing something that no one else has done before and the implications of what we may learn from it is just not only awesome, but it's very taxing to a team, and where building upon the strengths of the team and how they work together becomes exceedingly important. So let's delve into this, and later on when we finish, I guess we're going to have a chance to ask questions. I think the questions will be at the end, Sherry and Dan.
Yes, we'll give everyone a chance to ask you questions.
Okay.
Some students may ask questions in the chat. We can address those or not, but we can definitely have Q&A afterwards.
Okay, sounds excellent. All right. Let's see. So let's begin with these are book definitions of systems engineering, including how NASA sees it and how it defines it. But I include all of them because if you as Google define systems engineering, you're going to find a long list of definitions where everyone has an opinion of what it is. I actually showed in the box NASA's definition, and then I added other definitions that throughout the many years I've been in NASA made sense to me. And it's all a different view of the same subject, but tends to encompass what a system is all about. So you are, as a team, embarking on the design, the build, the operation of something that is intended to fulfill a mission, a purpose, and you are to do this within certain constraints and boundaries of cost, of schedule, and maybe other constraints that stakeholders impose upon you. And all of a sudden, a team of people in charge of this system is entrusted with making all of this work in a way that it more often than not results in incredible findings. I don't know how many of you had the opportunity to, for example, read the news about the black hole, the first imaging of a black hole. The whole design of how that is done, how the data is captured, how you go about analyzing the data, how you align the telescopes to do that kind of observation in itself is a marvel of systems engineering, as are every one of the elements that contributed, because there were many observatories that took part in such a monumental, actually, achievement. All right, so systems starts here in a balancing act. Now, I love this quote from Albert Einstein: any intelligent fool can make things better, more complex, and more violent. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction. Now, this is a very powerful message because, as I said, you're working on things that are unique, pushing the envelope, has never been done before. And it's so enticing to continue to add and expand upon what is already a complex task. So it is the job of a team of people to actually keep that within a sense of control, to be able to do it within the constraints that have been imposed upon the team. Now, it's a lot to do and little time, every single time. Now, the lead systems engineer in a project, and I want you all to think in terms of each of you being a lead systems engineer, even though there may be a person on your team that has that role. Everyone actually needs to view him or herself as a systems engineer contributing a subsystem to the bigger system, including the view of a manager, the view of a scientist, the view of any other subsystem that you may be responsible for. And the job is actually to preserve the integrity of a end-to-end design to get the job done. And it's something that cannot possibly be done by one person. Teams where all of a sudden only one person is carrying all the load, teams that do not know how to operate as a team, are the ones that run into the biggest challenges in just about any project that I was part of. And often when they start breaking apart with that mentality, the results are not optimal, and in some cases, not good. Now, I group, there are three basic elements to the missions that we do in NASA, the ones that I was part of. One is the management, obviously, someone that is responsible for building the relationships of a team, creating an environment for the team to thrive, and to direct the work and the teamwork necessary for them to be successful. Then there is the engineering, where the processes that lead to how you do system engineering, the composition of requirements, how you organize the not only the design, but the verification that leads to certainty of results. You know, you being able to say what we are building, what we are designing, what we are analyzing, it all adds up in response to the third bubble, which is science. And this is the freedom of ideas, the concept of constantly expanding the envelope of knowledge that makes these missions possible. There is another hidden message in this, and that is that there are subcultures, you know, people that think differently. Scientists, for example, are living a life of question. Engineers, like myself being an engineer, are more focused on results, on designs, on certainty, putting pressure on decisions being made that fulfill the science requirements. And then there is also a group that are of people responsible for the management aspects of it. These are the glue that keep the whole thing end to end, the schedule, the cost, the technical content within the agreements that you make with your stakeholders. So it's a process of recursive analysis, recursive design to go back, continue to go back and forth to make certain that everything hangs together, and something that you can verify through hard evidence. So I'd like for all of you to think about requirements in terms of technical decisions that can be demonstrated by analysis and some means of verification, whether it is a test, an analysis, a combination of the two. And these requirements, what we call requirements, is the codification of those decisions. A hidden message in this is that you make decisions when you have sufficient evidence to prove that that design will satisfy it, or that requirement will be satisfied and can be satisfied and demonstrated. Not everyone actually tends to view things like this, but I invite you to, if you start thinking about them in terms of decisions, you're driven to actually generate evidence, technical data, models, simulations, tests, analysis, you name it, to be ready to make those decisions with the best information available. And you do that, you start developing a discipline that tends to avoid problems later on, when sometimes teams actually scramble trying to make ends meet, and where often you may find cases, well, I shouldn't say often, but more often than I would like to see, where you find teams chasing requirements that are orphaned or going astray down paths that actually are not productive. So you're designing, this spacecraft or observatory that you are about to deploy in the space environment, that is going to be interacting in that environment to make certain key observations in ways that allow the scientists and the science community get the kind of information and data that they, in many cases, have been dreaming about all their life. And the results that we are exposed to these days, actually more frequently than in the early days of NASA even. Now, I had the privilege to manage several classes of missions in NASA throughout my career in NASA. And they're grouped in NASA. Missions tend to be grouped. There's suborbital missions. These are sounding rockets, airplane observations, airplane-borne observations, balloons, etc. And then there are space missions. And although I had the privilege to participate in some suborbital, most of my career focused on the space free flying, as we call them, missions, orbital missions. And they fell in three categories. One category being the small missions. The second category, the medium class missions. And small missions tend to be about under $250 million, all the way down to just tens, or in some cases, missions that are in the single digit when you're dealing with, for example, nanosats that may fit that category. Medium class missions tend to be sort of in the middle, in the 250 to less than $1 billion. And then there are large missions that are the over $1 billion category. And as you can imagine, this is our huge investments that the nation makes on one-of-a-kind activities, all designed to target certain science questions. So smaller missions tend to be very targeted. Medium expand that horizon a bit more, and then the large class or flagship type missions that actually are designed to open the floodgates of knowledge wide open for many small and medium class missions to follow. These are the ones that change the paradigm or the state of knowledge for decades to come. And I'll share one of those with you in a moment. But one of the missions that when I was the SMEX project manager, the very first mission we launched was called SAMPEX, Solar Anomalous and Magnetospheric Particle Explorer. And, small class mission, you could almost hug the whole spacecraft with your, two hands, but had very unique instruments to measure solar, actually cosmic rays that arrive into the Earth environment from other galaxies and through tortuous paths throughout the solar system. And the scientists out of that were able to determine what they were, where they were coming from, how they affected the magnetic field and the environment around Earth. So quite successful. In fact, we operated it well beyond its design life, and then turned it over to a group of university students to operate on their own, actually, entirely. They built their own operation system with NASA's assistance and took care of the mission until its final days. Another mission, now in the more moderate or medium class category, is called the Wilkinson Microwave Anisotropy Probe. At the time, it was just MAP. It was named after Dave Wilkinson, a scientist from Princeton, who was one of the brain trusts of the science behind it. And it was a mission designed to follow on the Cosmic Background Explorer that I also worked on, the mission that actually proved the theory of Big Bang at a time when, during the time of COVID, there were multiple competing theories about the origins of the universe. And so NASA pursued a proposal from one of the scientists, a Nobel Prize winner, Dr. John Mather, who conceived of a mission to measure the cosmic background that others had observed as noise from the ground in the old Bell laboratories that existed many years ago. And so this mission, once we got proved that theory, that how the universe could have been created in a Big Bang and how it has cooled over time, allowing some structure to start to evolve in the universe, and these are the structures that today we observe. And so WMAP was intended to penetrate even further, and out of its findings came the concept of actually supporting evidence to theories that had existed also for quite some time regarding the composition of the universe. So imagine that all of a sudden we realize that what we observe in our universe is about 4% of what the universe is made of. Everything else is dark energy or that dark matter in some form that we're just now beginning to understand, and with little evidence actually to support it and to cement it as a true and prevailing theory. So it's very, very exciting to be part of anything like this, and very humbling, right? To all of a sudden realize that our place in the universe as we observe it is just a tiny grain of sand in a much bigger beach and a much bigger ocean. And then we move on to the larger class telescope. I'm sure all of you are quite familiar with the Hubble Space Telescope. One telescope that, as a result of a team of people not paying close attention or living under so much pressure to deliver within cost and with the schedule, that they started violating some of the key principles of engineering and found themselves deploying a telescope that didn't do much better than ground observatories after lots of money being spent in such an endeavor. Now, luckily, we had the ability to repair it. Astronauts recovered the telescope, repaired it with new optics, and allowed the mission to be the success it has become. One of the most, if not the most productive observatory in history, thanks to the innovation and creativity and courage, actually, of astronauts and many of engineers and scientists that have worked on it. The next step, actually, beyond HST, though, is now a James Webb Space Telescope. This is a 6.5 meter diameter telescope, almost twice the size of HST. New classes of mirrors. These are segmented mirrors that allow us, NASA, to deploy that much larger telescope because you can fold it into, you'll see a video that I have in a moment, operating at much colder temperatures and needing, as a result, a set of passive cooling sun shields, and located at the Lagrangian point 2, L2, where you're farther away from the sun, you're hidden from a lot of the radiation and solar flux that hits telescopes when we're much closer. And it's actually a marvel of engineering. And I will share with you in a moment, once you see the video, some of the experiences in not only having worked as part of that team, but after I retired as part of a independent review team that look at some of the challenges that the engineering team in that project was facing. Now that's what James Webb looks like in its cocoon when it's launched. It is folded up so it can fit in the fairing of the rocket. And you can start to see now how they start deploying the antennas, the mechanisms where the shields are folded, and also the telescope is stood up so that we can have it in its almost final position. And you're going to start to see now how the sunshade starts to deploy. You see the arms pulling on the sunshade. It's about the size, by the way, of a tennis court. It has 5 layers, and you can see them getting taut. So it's very straight, reflective surface. And then you stand them up, the 5 layers, so there is some spacing between them to create the proper thermal gradients so that the telescope can get as cold as it possibly can. And the instruments also. It includes 3 very powerful, actually 4, if you include the guidance sensor as part of an instrument. So you can see there the telescope having been deployed completely, the primary mirror, secondary, and behind the mirror are the instruments for mid-infrared spectroscopy, as well as visible in the infrared regime imaging. A fantastic accomplishment of engineering, before I get to the next few charts, that actually has gone through tremendous challenges over its life cycle. The last time I presented these slides to a group such as yours, the launch date was 2020. And then as they started their verification program, they ran into some difficulties, seemingly simple things that were missed in either the design or the testing or the assembly that failed during the test program at the higher level, and ended up actually creating problems that rippled through the whole design and delayed by about 9 months or so, close to a year, the original launch date. The key message is, and as I'm talking about these classes of missions that you got to keep in mind, is that the bigger, the more complex the system, the more the need for people to be watchful, not only of the design, but also of everything else that makes this work. How do you test it? How do you verify? How do you produce the evidence necessary to give you confidence that it is going to work as designed? And this is the job of everybody on the team. And I cannot emphasize that message enough. It is everyone's on the team's responsibility to be watchful, to work with each other, to watch each other's back, to make certain that in this pressure cooker of an environment that delivers the kinds of missions we're talking about, that we work together as a team and actually find ways to help each other, and for all of the team members to be able to speak up when things are not going quite right, have the freedom actually to raise your hand when you don't agree with something, and for the whole team to be open-minded to listen to those messages so that you can be successful. Now, a simple view of a system design environment is obviously the system you are designing, and you can decompose it into multiple layers of the system of interest, which is what you will ultimately deliver, and then enabling systems that are required to support it. So this is the infrastructure around it, the other equipment, the what have you around it that is necessary for that system to be built, to be assembled, to be tested the way you designed it. Now, from my perspective, I always looked at that environment in multiple dimensions. One being, do you have the people, the tools, the facilities to deliver? Often, and you know what that means is that beginning with people, you look across the board and say, do we have the proper experience base, the proper mix, the proper respect for differences, the cultures, the what have you that need to come together? Because often these are organizations that are disparate and located in geographical locations that are distant from where the project is being managed. And all of a sudden, you got to make all of this work towards that purpose. So, not only is the focus on the hardware, but it's the focus on the people that are making this possible. Are they armed with the tools, the facilities, and what have you, that makes their job a bit simpler than it is? Because we already know that most of these things are quite complex and require about every ounce of energy of everyone to make it successful. But are we enabling them with the tools and the facilities for them to be efficient and effective? The other is, are there the proper policies, processes, and procedures to enable them to do the work in a way that is predictable and as deterministic as you can make it? And this cannot be underestimated. I mean, there's a certain pace to the life cycle, and although there may be different ways to do it, you hear about the NASA life cycle. I will touch upon it a bit later. That tends to be a cascade of events that lead to reviews and decision points. Other people, as of teams or bigger teams, may decide to work using agile or other techniques. But in the end, it is how they come together and how do they understand those processes and procedures so that you do not cut corners in places that can come back to bite you. And the bigger the system, the more critical and important that is. The last piece is the checks and balances. Do you actually have people around it or within the team that are constantly asking the question, have we missed anything? How are things working? Is everyone doing okay? So that we can be successful. And checks and balances is very much necessary because we as humans will make mistakes. In James Webb, one of the findings of the independent review team that I had the privilege to be part of, that was established after this failure that I alluded to earlier, was that we observed that sometimes there was a requirement for an independent person to come and say, did you actually check the certain voltage, or did you check that a certain plug was in a certain position? Things of that nature. And for good reason, there was a step in the process that required for someone independent to verify that that was true. Some people we found were relying upon an answer. If I go and let's say you're a technician and you were responsible for flipping a switch, and I as an independent assessor, I'm supposed to come and verify that it is in the position you said it was in. And not because I do not trust you, but because I want to be able to see it. right? Because we can make mistakes. And in the case of JWST, that had happened where the technician himself or herself were checking the box and no one was verifying it. And then to realize that it came back to bite them later because someone missed some of the checks and balances necessary to make it work. And there are plenty of examples in other areas where these things play out in ways that we regret having cut corners. Now, so standing back a little bit, what does the project look like? And you're going to start to see me use the term authority and accountability. Accountability, or in teams, you have people that play a certain role. A project manager has a role, a system engineer, a project scientist, and so on. And that is their role. They have a certain responsibility or are accountable to deliver on results, right? Everyone on the team is being entrusted to deliver on something on a certain timetable for a certain amount of money. Now, with it, there has to be a sense of accountability, right? Meaning, I know what I am doing, I know my role, I know what people are holding me accountable for, that is very clear, but I have been given the authority to make the decisions for me to be able to be successful in delivering in what I'm being entrusted with the responsibility for. This is something that everyone on the team at every one of these layers that I'm showing in this picture needs to feel ownership for, because you cut the corners on any one of these or actually start undermining the authority, the accountability on any one of these pieces, and the whole system starts falling apart. Part of this is actually for the whole group to learn to work together towards what is going to be inevitably an incredibly stressful environment. I cannot emphasize enough, whether it was a small mission, medium class, or larger ones, it is very stressful when someone all of a sudden is holding you accountable to deliver on a certain date certain for a certain level of resources on something that has never been built before. And it's critically important that not only you master the procedures and the processes and what have you, but that you nurture the team that is actually responsible for doing that, that you watch after each other's back, that you actually take the time to celebrate also the successes and take some time off to step away from the pressure cooker and be able to change the scenery and the conversation a little bit to remove some of that pressure, to be fresh to come back the next day to go at it again. So in my projects, I always, we always accommodated and allowed time for what we call, let's step away from all of this and change the subject. Now, having been in the environment for so long, even though we actually took it and viewed it as a break, we always ended up talking about science and technology and engineering. Later on, we developed the habits of talking about family and about other themes that actually were equally important and allowed us to relax a bit more than just being in the pressure cooker, although highly satisfying environment that we were in. All right, so I made a list of, I used to share this information when people would ask me, what are the key areas of expertise and technology that are necessary for missions? And this is here for your reference. I think you're gonna get to see or get copies of this. Everybody will, I presume, Sherry and Dan. And these are the kinds of disciplines that I found, not all of them always, but the large majority of them that were necessary for the kinds of missions that I supported. So I included here for your reference and to also demonstrate the breadth and depth of areas of expertise that were required to make the missions successful. All right, so we go from the systems engineer being, on one hand, the technical architect, the requirements, the decisions, how they're codified, the architecture and the system design, when you begin from early concepts to actually start getting much deeper into the intricacies of a design. How do you envision this being verified from the lower levels all the way up? Because you design and flow down the requirements, and you need to make certain that you have means to verify it on the way up. And make certain that the operations concepts actually can take advantage of the observatory and vice versa. Then you start shifting gears once you finish the formulation and have approved to start building things in earnest. You start shifting your mentality to one of a technical implementer. What have we missed? How, tracking the resources that have been entrusted to you, the verification and validation plan, and anomaly resolution. This is why earlier I referred to preserving the technical integrity of a design. At the bottom of this, I included the reference to two documents in NASA that if you're not familiar with, you should. They make interesting reading. 6105 is a handbook that speaks to, even though it's called system engineering, it talks about management, the role of the different players on a project. And then there is 7123 that gets more to the system processes and procedures and expectations from the team. And actually, have been put together capturing the multi-decades of experience with people that have worked on NASA missions. Recently I was giving a talk. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the NASA, the National Academy of Sciences decadal process. In NASA science, there are four divisions. Sherry alluded to me being in charge of actually planetary and the solar system at one time in my career. And that was one of the divisions, planetary science. The other one is astrophysics, earth sciences, and heliophysics. And NASA charters the national academies to, every 10 years, help them develop a visionary plan moving forward. Those plans are what led to, or recommendations are what led to, for example, JWST and missions of this nature, including the Mars missions that I was also responsible for a while. It is the brain trust of the scientists across the country and around the world contributing to what they believe are the key questions and key concepts that NASA should invest its energy and resources in. And it is in that environment that we start putting together the pieces that touch upon the missions that you see. And once you make it past that window of what does the nation think are the highest priority questions, you start now moving it into an implementation and how you're going to get them done for limited resources that can provide the most and balanced approach to everything that the community would like to see. Not all of it actually makes it, but a good percentage of it does end in the kinds of missions that we enjoy the discoveries from. Life cycle focus ought to be on mission success and risk management. And that, as I mentioned earlier, is something that is the responsibility of everyone on the team. Okay, so I made reference to 7120 and the 7123 and the 6105 handbook. I invite you to actually, at your leisure, there is a link in the presentation that you can get access to it and become familiar to how do you go from stakeholder expectations, including the decadal plans that I referred to the divisions at NASA headquarters, to missions that are designed to fulfill those needs until everything is realized the way you envisioned it. Okay, the project system lifecycle. We begin with these concepts, high level. I call them dreams, although they're more than just dreams. These are the vision of something that may be possible to start satisfying a set of questions that there are of interest to a broad scientific community. So you enter, complete those very early concepts and enter now a process of approval to start investing much greater resources into the design, into the analysis, into proving that you can do what you said you're going to do for the resources you have available. And going back to what I said earlier, it is walking before you run. You start providing evidence that not only what you're doing as a team, you establish a project, you establish behaviors and a team environment that allow you and your stakeholders to embark in this endeavor with much more and significant resources to move forward. Give you a sense of what we're talking about. Just about every mission, when you enter phase A and phase B, you are spending anywhere between 15 to 20% of what the actual mission cost is going to be by the time you finish your definition phase. Can be significant amount of money or significant amount of other resources. However, it's just a fraction of what the total cost is to give you an opportunity to make adjustments if necessary. There are times when, in particular for the much larger missions, we've had to tone back some of the appetite because simply we can't afford it. Many of them have found themselves in that situation. But you want to make certain that you actually have the resources to be successful, because cutting the corners usually leads to people taking much greater risks than they should. Engineers in particular, we tend to be very optimistic. We tend to believe that we can do more than we actually can in some cases. And this is why I continue to emphasize that the whole team working together and watching after each other is what makes a very difficult task an enjoyable one, always challenging, but a more enjoyable one, to make certain that you have the tools, the resources, and the people and the capability across the board to get it done. Now, mission success. This slide I added as a result of the most recent work I've done for some of the NASA large missions. And I think a key message I want to give you is that when we speak of mission success, it takes a different meaning the deeper you get into a project. When we're talking about phase A and phase B, up to this approval to proceed or validation that you can proceed with a much bigger expenditures on the mission, you can trade risk and trade different components, trade scope to make it fit. Once that decision is made, though, that you can move forward with the actual implementation, now it's about execution. This is about sticking to the schedule, to all the plans, and actually making certain that you're protecting the integrity of the system. This is where all of the checks and balances actually are absolutely essential, and for the team to work together to get it done in the most effective and efficient way possible. JWST, throughout its life cycle, has run into enormous cost growth. And I actually shamelessly say enormous cost growth. We're talking about billions of dollars of cost growth from what it was originally estimated to be. Variety of reasons. It will be a case study that we can talk about at some point in a future interaction. But there are many people, many eyes looking at what's going on. And one of the questions that we were asked as part of a independent review team by the General Administrative Office and Inspector General was, how did we miss those signals? And actually, when we stood back, I say, actually, to a large extent, we did not. It is that the team actually started protecting the capability to the point where they started losing sight of what they were being asked to do and the challenges associated with it. Often in that environment, it can become very political. So these are pressures that are upon the team, from multiple angles. And then, there are the people that do reviews at the key points have very specific success criteria. When you look at 7123 or 6105, you're going to see certain criteria at each one of those gates for entrance and for exit. What would make the decision authority say, I'm ready to proceed. However, independent review teams tend to look at other things, and I'm going to share some of those with you because they are very telling. One thing is to put in paper the canonical processes and the kind of stuff that these books talk about. Another thing is for someone, whether within the team or the safety net, of checks and balances, to be watchful of what is going on. For example, when teams, one of the things we did on JWST is that we noticed that it was tremendous pressure, schedule pressure on the team. And we had the opportunity to interview a group of people. Their management knew we were going to interview them. We came to an agreement that there would be no attribution or retribution as a result of what we heard. We just wanted to actually learn what was going on. And so we had opportunity to interview several very talented people who, without exception, said, we are working so hard that we barely have time to breathe. We need more people, we need more this or that. I mean, they provided a wealth of information that led to a recommendation to significant investment in talent to help them and to actually start looking at the schedule differently so that these people that were working so hard had the opportunity to go even back home and spend time with their families. What I just told you is critically important because doesn't always come out of the typical and canonical success criteria of reviews. Someone has to be walking around, paying attention. Are they taking enough time to rest, step away from the pressure, actually watching after each other, paying attention to what's going on, the checks and balances that are necessary? Those things are not learned as part of a cookbook. Processes and procedures. They are the result of the team actually creating a team environment that is quite different, and for the management around them to be also aware and watchful of what may be going on. I'll touch upon that later on in the presentation, and we're coming close to the end. This is another view of the life cycle. In the very early phases, as you can see illustrated on this picture, the cost uncertainty is huge. We find actually that by the time you enter phase A, typically the uncertainty is in the 50 to 60%. So you have huge error bars in just about anything you design. In some cases, 100% or even higher than that, depending on the complexity of the mission. But so that says that actually your cost commitment and your design maturity is still low. And people need to understand that this is the reason why it's so important in these early phases to pay attention to this. And in these early phases, it's also the time when you start developing behaviors and habits that will make it successful and more manageable than otherwise. So it's critically important that the team watch the technology, the maturity, the creating a team environment that actually is going to carry them through the real hard phases when the mission is approved. Now, there's a reason for, what we call KDPC or preliminary design review, for it to be, there to be a gate right after it. This is when you confirm the mission, when you have much greater certainty of the cost, on the schedule, of the content of what you're delivering. And you start shifting now to the new definition of mission success. This is where you get now into crisis management. And the deeper you get into the life cycle is Band-Aid time, because you are now building hardware that is coming together on the floor, where now your ability to change things is a bit more difficult, and the implications are much greater. You're carrying a marching army of people that are now necessary to get you through the end line. And part of it is, be able to walk around with a proper paranoia. And this came from a great friend of mine, Gentry Lee, who says, you got to actually have the proper balance and respect for the work you are doing. If you don't have enough of this proper paranoia, you fall into complacency, into thinking actually that you are infallible, that you can get it all done, and lose sight actually of the complexity of the kind of work that we do for the kinds of missions that actually change the state of knowledge. If you have too much of it, though, you become paralyzed. So this proper balance of actually respecting what it is that you're doing and being able to communicate broadly throughout the team what you're dealing with, the challenges, analyzing results, questioning results, so that we arrive at the conclusions that make sense to the team. And then get to the bottom line of anomalies, because you are going to find them. If you're doing your job, things are going to break, things are going to fail, things are not going to go quite the way you envision them. And so is the team the one that helping each other will actually penetrate those for the mission to ultimately be successful. All right, lastly, what I call the entries for your diary. And I invite you to create your own diary in whatever form makes sense to you. One is a message of discernment between desires and what are real requirements. Requirements, they are cubed, what I call rateable. There's a relationship and there's a rationale. You are able actually to explain all of these in those dimensions. Trusting your team. This is the best asset you can possibly have. The team that you have around you and the health of that team that you have around you. Clear roles, lines of accountability and authority. We spoke about that earlier. The flow down of requirements that is traceable and that you view them as decisions, which means you don't do this on the fly. There's got to be evidence that support what you're calling now a requirement. Testing the credibility of your plan. That means open it up for critique, opening it up for other experts to view what you're doing, making certain that you have the resources you have and proper margins to do it. A strong system of checks and balances that you invite. It's a healthy, actually, invitation for other experts to come in and to tell you, either reinforce what you're doing or help you correct mistakes that we may have made along the way, because after all, we're humans. There are, in just about every design I'm worked with, some single point failures. And tracking those, once you've accepted and minimized the number of those, tracking them is critically important throughout the life. Not just putting in a piece of paper, yes, we have them. Is have we throughout the life been following up on them so they have not actually expanded beyond where they started? Be able to communicate and monitor progress credibly, that you can actually demonstrate against your plan, and in a way that you are delivering in your commitments, right? That actually you stick to the plan. And if that plan actually doesn't make any sense, for you to be the first one to say, this doesn't add up. We may need to renegotiate some of the agreements on dates or what have you, rather than falling victim to optimism that may end up getting you into trouble. Treating the resources across the board, mass, power, volume, etc., as money, because they are. In fact, once you allow any one of them to get out of control, down or up, they usually show up in ways that are very costly. Verify and validate, test as you fly as you test, as much as you possibly can. We find ourselves in the new environment with much larger observatories, JWST and beyond, where validating as a whole system and verifying as a whole system becomes very difficult. There aren't facilities large enough or capable enough to do it. In those cases, though, there are many other ways to verify in as flight-like environment as you can what it is you're ultimately building. And then finally, and not lastly, actually, celebrating early wins and acknowledge your teammates for their contributions. I go back to the message I gave you earlier. We would always in the project take the time to celebrate, to step back, to take a breather, to allow the decompression that is necessary to recharge the batteries to come back at it, because it is hard, it is unique, it's something that is what rewrites the books that we now, I cannot tell you about. I would reveal my age on the 34 years in NASA, the number of books that were rewritten from the time that I started as a result, in many cases, of the missions that I was part of. That, ladies and gentlemen, is why this work is so, in my opinion, empowering, so fantastic, and why I actually, every time Sherry says, would you be willing to talk to the team of people? I, without exception, unless something major happens, I'm in, because I believe in this as I probably would bet all of you are. Anyway, it's time for me to take a breather and to open it up for questions, Sherry. You control.
Well, I tell you what, that was a lot of just amazing kinds of resources and life lessons and everything rolled into one. All that good stuff, Orlando, just like it always is. But coming from your experience, and I've been watching the chat, and the things you've said have really hit some nerves, like the pressure cooker kinds of experiences that sometimes being in this business does tend to throw at you, and how you deal with that. You've really hit a nerve across a lot of people tonight, and I think, knowing that these are hard things we're trying to do. I mean, you talk about exploration and doing things as unique first time types of experiences. It really takes a lot of knowing you've got to make it work, or if it fails, picking yourself up, learning from those lessons, and going again. And not only that, the whole world's watching half the
The
time.
whole world is watching.
No pressure, but yeah, everybody wants to know and the latest thing, so, but it's, as you said, it's really worth it in terms of you're doing unique things. Out of all the billions of people on this planet, you're doing really unique, amazing things when you're doing this kind of business.
Yeah.
So
I was sharing recently with a good friend, Sherry, that these missions we undertake, if they were easy, other people would be doing them, right? I mean,
right.
this is the kind of stuff that we do because we believe in. But it is an emotional, it's a physical, it's a mental, it's a sensorial, it's a spiritual investment in something. So it's all of those dimensions, and actually we cannot lose sight of all that is required for it to be successful, and for ultimately the team be able to celebrate on the results.
Well, and it's funny because I think you've experienced it, I've experienced it, maybe some of you in the academy have, but when you're standing at Kennedy and you're seeing that rocket in the distance that you just worked on, and all the people that have invested their lives in putting that, whatever it is, on the top of that rocket ready to go into space, it is an emotional time. Most of us cry when the rocket actually gets off the planet and it continues on, and we're hearing the calls in terms of the tracking system and where it is, and you've got booster separation, and you've got main engine cutoff, and all those kinds of things. It's extremely emotional to actually know that you had a piece of that and it's on its way, or at a landing, or when it gets to the planet and it inserts, or does whatever it needs to do correctly. You're in for the next leg of that adventure. And there's just nothing quite like it in terms of the kinds of things that that emotional investment really does portray in you. And it's pretty amazing.
It is.
So anyway, I think that that's funny, Calvin. I'm just looking at your thing. One of my professors says, "Mama always cries at the launches." Yeah. Well, and I'm one of those too, because it's a pretty emotional time.
I
And it's
cried
yeah,
like a baby.
yeah,
I'm proud of it.
yeah. Me too. I am too. And all of you, when you're at the Lucy launch, are going to feel that same way because you've been part of this mission as well. And just to see something go off and be, especially, going to look at the bones of the solar system. How cool is that? There isn't anything better than that. So it'll be a lot of fun to have you there. In fact, at the science team meeting today, Catherine was just giving everybody the lowdown of how all of you have been invited to the launch. And and we're hoping that we can start planning to get you there in terms of meetups and roommates and hotels and all that information when it comes time. It's really an amazing time. So we hope to see La Fam there. In terms of where we're going to go for the next big event. So with that, I think, Dan, do you want to run the Q&A slides up? They know
sure do.
They know the
you know the drill. Wait, I don't have any Team Trello boards up, do I? Last time I had Team
Oh, yeah.
Trello board's tabbed. And we got comments like, "Oh, they're watching you, team."
Oh, gosh.
What do you
Okay.
do when your
Yeah.
teammates and you are not on the same page?
Good question, Miguel.
This is a great question. You know, every once in a while, we come across situations where there are diverging, or in some cases, just different opinions about something. And I think the most important thing to do is, number one, remain calm. Number two, gather those that are closest to the debate or the question or the disagreement in the same room as often as you possibly can. And by same room, I mean ideally physically, or through other means, so that there is a continued communication. Whomever is the leader or the organizer of that effort needs to be, one, remain calm. Second, be willing to listen to everybody and focus. And it takes a skill. Focus not on the disagreement, but focus on the commonalities. Because usually I find that often people are arguing over things that tend to be expressions of language, expressions of something that was missing, etc. So it takes a skill to be able to focus on do we agree on, and be able to separate that from areas that you genuinely may disagree on, and start tackling those areas one by one with great care. What you want to make certain of that you do not dismiss any part of the conversation simply because the emotions took over. In some cases, by the way, the process may lead to solutions within half a day. In other cases, you find that what is missing, if there is data or information that is missing, that you actually cannot short circuit. So you have to find the mechanism to allow everyone to express their views, gather more data and information, come back, and you go through several rounds. It happens all the time. Actually, I would be surprised if everyone is in agreement all the time. When that happens, something isn't quite right. What we do is too hard, actually, for everyone to fall in place in one sweep. It just doesn't happen. I hope I answered the question.
There's another one, how do you approach a slacking teammate? So somebody who's just kind of cruising, but he or she is not contributing?
Yeah, so, one of the things I said earlier, I mean, this is an emotional, it is physical, mental, sensorial, you name it. I mean, all the dimensions that are an investment into this. What I found often is that in teams, you have to create an environment where, one, someone is actually caring for the growth of the team and the learning environment. The other is, another dimension is including. People that need to be in certain discussions are invited, and if you're not, you know why you are not. So there is a certain respect to a team environment where there is inclusion, an invitation for diversity of opinion. The other is a reality-based optimism where you actually invite people from, say, the most creative minds on your team. There are some people that are just natural at this, expansive, technology-driven, and what have you, where you actually invite them to contribute in some fashion, and you listen to the ideas that may help come up with different solutions. And the other dimension, Sherry, being very clear on the path and the direction you have been asked to follow. Why do I bring this up? Is that I find that often we have team members that are exceptionally talented that are not being tapped into or invited into the conversation. And they often tend to retreat to a corner and not participate. That's one aspect of it.
Right.
Others may be simply because they do not have the tools, the experience to do what they were asked to do. And it's incumbent upon the leadership of the organization to notice that may be going on, and where the individuals may find themselves in, whether it is embarrassed or not quite confident enough to bring it up. I learned over time to raise my hand and said, I have no clue of what you have just been asked me to do. We got to find somebody else because, I can contribute, but I am not prepared to do what you did. I will when we're done, but right now I am not. So we try to bring the help that they need for them to be successful.
I think that's great. And I know that, there's a lot of things we've asked these students to do, and a lot of it's stretching. It's first time they've seen, some of the tasks and things, and they volunteer, but they may not really have the knowledge of what's involved. And it's really hard when you volunteered, everybody's been assigned, and suddenly you don't want to stand up and say, well, actually, I don't know how to do that. And you do, you probably retreat, or you become non-communicative. And so it's reaching out to that person just to say, we just want to make sure you're okay, or do you need some help? And we've been trying to stress the fact that it's a strength of character to actually come out and say, I'm really buried, or I actually am having trouble with this. Could I send up a signal that I need some help? Is there somebody who could actually, come and maybe partner with me on this task?
Yeah, I actually, I lost count of the many times I did that because, often, if I were proved to be successful in some things, people immediately would assume that I would be successful at just about everything. And there were some tasks that were assigned to me that I said, I'm going to need help because this is, not my area of expertise, or I am missing some pieces or what have you. And ultimately, then we were all able to contribute to it. And I learned a great deal in the process. So next time I am prepared.
There's another one. How do you personally deal with, how you recognize when you're pushing yourself too hard and you won't be able to accomplish everything you've been trying to do?
Well, one thing, I know this is sometimes easier said than done, but when you, at the end of the day, come home and all you can think about is the mountain of work that either hasn't been completed or done, and I find myself then in a very stressful environment. That is a time when someone has to raise their hand and say, this is becoming too much. The example I use on JWST, where at least someone said, tell me what's going on. And they opened up, and it's a floodgate. And finally, they raised their hand and said, this is getting to be too stressful for me, for my family, for my friends, that I need to find help, a break, or something. And actually, when that is fixed, people come back recharged and energized and far more productive than being stuck in that stressful environment that it's physically and mentally. I mean, it's
we've been trying to stress that it's not a weakness to actually have that recognition and to retreat or to back off, to get yourself kind of reset and re-strengthened. It is actually a real important part of recognizing and having that as a strength. And you won't find yourself being nibbled away or just hitting the wall quite as many times if you actually start to learn to recognize those signs and mitigate them fast instead of letting them all add up.
You know what JWST did for all of you, two things that they did. They changed the whole schedule, by the way, to allow 2 Sundays a month to be completely free for everyone. And it's rotating, so different team members would have an opportunity to be with their families. They also inserted what they call science and hot dogs talks, where they would invite prominent scientists to talk about science, and they would invite the families into the facility to share in the discussions and share in the food and share in a moment that people would appreciate what they were doing.
And Austin, I'm making a call out to you because I absolutely think this is like all of us, that you beat yourself up if you want to make sure you have to do well, you have to work really hard to do it, but it's at a cost. And you felt like it wasn't easy, it wasn't good enough. Learning to fail is important, otherwise you won't be able to grow. Be kind to yourself and ask for help and be willing to learn.
You bet.
And that's a lot of wisdom in there. And I think that we don't allow ourselves, especially in today's competitive society, especially in an era of social media where everybody's life looks perfect, when it's not.
Mhm.
I mean, that's easy to just kind of project that. But in real life, the people in Orlando, people have been asking, so how did you get started? Where did you come from? How did you get to be where? And I know this story, so I think it's an important one to share because, you know, a lot of us think, well, you're just starting off really at that high level and you never look back. But why don't you talk about where your story is?
Well, I actually, you know, I graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Puerto Rico at a time in the 1970s, late 70s, when, you know, the federal government was hiring engineering talent, particularly from minority institutions. And sadly, I say now, and uh, at that time, few universities in the nation, in fact, at the time only one, it was the University of Puerto Rico, was producing engineers of the kind of people that NASA and other organizations were looking for. So I was fortunate enough to fulfill a lifelong dream to be hired by NASA. And lucky for me was NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, where all they do is science work. Now, as a mechanical engineering engineer walking into this environment, knowing little other than what I saw on TV or read in books and was inspired by, to enter into that environment, the first thing that happened to me that I was embraced in that community of people that were committed to helping me develop and grow. And I was one that wasn't afraid to jump into I would volunteer to do everything, by the way. And you know, but yep, you know, and I knew my limitations, but was willing to ask for, you know, to do different things and rotate, etc. And you know, part of that was the work. It was inspirational. Cosmic Background Explorer was starting at the time, so I just immersed myself in that environment, and it was that, you know, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of you bringing people behind you as well. Two things I believe in. Your one of your jobs is to make certain that your boss or the person above you succeeds. Why? Because if he or she succeeds, so will you by definition. The other is you actually want to make certain that your teammates and people around you can actually take over for you when you are not there. And that's very important because it means that you are contributing unselfishly and that everyone is watching each other's back. And you start developing an environment of trust. And so that I actually learned and grew within that kind of environment. I made mistakes that were horrible at times, but the team was able to recover because I, one, acknowledged it, two, the team itself pointed it out, and we learned to work in a different kind of environment. So that led to a multitude of missions that were at the engineering level. Later on, I started moving into management positions, project management positions, because I noticed that I loved building teams and getting people inspired and empowered to do the kinds of stuff that we love within NASA. That led actually to being invited to run parts of the organization from some of the directorates within NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, being invited to be part of by the NASA administrator to be part of the Office of a Chief Engineer as a Deputy Chief Engineer for systems. To my incredible, actually, pleasure, being invited to take over the Mars exploration program in 2001. And from that, which is, you know, by the way, that was one of the most incredible experiences anyone can live. And Sherry, I know you can share in that comment. And from that, the Planetary Systems Division, later on to be Deputy Associate Administrator for Programs in Science. They're going back to Goddard Space Flight Center to be the the head of engineering, later the Deputy Center Director for Science and Technology. It has been a dream. And now have the privilege to be invited to help review, help critique, help missions be successful from a different angle. Are they actually paying the kinds of stuff that I just shared with you? You know, are we paying attention to what we're doing? Are we building teams that can actually last? Are we doing the right things?
Do you need to breathe for a minute or take a drink of water? You've been, we
But
had you talking
I'm
for quite a
inspired.
while.
I'm inspired.
One of the questions that I saw go by here, let's see, there was one about how do you actually be inclusive, and you know, I know some of the things I've heard lately are we have people who have ideas, but maybe all the good ideas in the team, you're only choosing one. How do you actually kind of get down and have everybody set their other ideas aside and go for what the team has chosen to do or follow? You know, I know a lot of people kind of harbor some resentment and it's like, it wasn't my idea. Or what would be your best action in terms of bringing everybody together when you have to down select, which happens all the time on
Yeah.
missions?
You know, the one is I begin with clear rules of engagement, right? That there is a certain criteria whereby we're going to arrive at a decision, and once people buy into the idea of those rules of engagement, it makes the discussions a bit easier. Now it takes leadership to actually keep the conversation on point and on focus, to be able to get to that point. You know, we're dealing with very, very challenging things, right? That no one has ever done. And all of a sudden you find yourself in a debate where there may be, I don't know how many ways to get it done. So how do you actually sort through all of this to draw a line on what are the decisions going to be based upon? You know, can we actually get to that point where even though some there may be some different ways to do it, at least everyone can raise their hands in earnest and say, I can live with it. I can live with this, you know, and I can see how some of my ideas are being incorporated, perhaps not all, but then it becomes a team effort and a team product. And that's how, you know, we make these things successful.
So if you have somebody who needs to step away to clear their head, do you have any good advice in terms of how to give them space, but not let them know you still care and you want them to be part of the team? But you know, everybody needs that time if they're experience burnout or they're overwhelmed or whatever else is going on in their life. A lot of times we don't know. What's the best way to handle that, would you say?
Well, you know, I mentioned that I found myself enjoying and developing skills that made me a team builder, right? And one of the things that I learned to do is to be aware and pay attention to the people on my team. And it, you know, this can be at multiple levels, Sherry, and for everybody. You know, could be sub team or subsystem or what have you. And once you have developed a trusting relationship where you're willing to listen to each other and be aware, I could at times I found myself putting my hand around someone or, you know, calling them out for a discussion where I point out, you know, I've noticed that you seem to be quite stressed out, and, you know, is there something we can do together to help the situation? Every once in a while, Sherry, it was personal, going through something with the family, you know, something that unexpected happening. Who knows? I mean, we are all humans, right? We run into these things. But the fact that I asked actually opened the door for a much bigger conversation. And every once in a while, by the way, there were others that were reluctant to admit it. And I would actually have to step in and say, listen, I want you to take a break. And there is no negotiation in this. I want you to take a break, and I'm going to see you in a week. The work is going to be here. You're still a part of this team and will continue to be. But you need to step away from this because the emotions are getting in the way of even having an open conversation. That actually worked exceptionally well for me. And it was a two-way discussion, right? But as leaders of your sub-team or what have you, you have to be willing to make those kinds of calls.
So, Dan, go ahead and unmute Veronica.
Yeah, hey, Veronica, you're unmuted. You're on live with Orlando.
Okay, and my hair is caught on my speaker. Hello.
Your question was good. I didn't. It kept rotating
okay,
past. I couldn't get it
Yeah,
done. So
yeah.
go ahead and ask that question.
Okay, great. Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much, Orlando, for coming to talk to us. This has been super helpful because I think all of us here are leaders who will eventually work in NASA. And so my question pertains to mental health culture and the culture of self-care. And I was just curious if that culture has improved at all since the time you started your career at NASA.
I actually, interestingly enough, I was having a conversation this morning with someone who told me that the team this person was working on had lost some of that edge. So it is actually not uniform. Is the best answer that I can give you. And I want you to please listen to this carefully because it is something that needs to be nurtured and watched for. Just like you said, are we actually paying attention to the training development of the people? Are we actually being aware of what's going on? And have we lost touch that with the fact that we're all humans, we are all contributing, we're doing this because we love it, but we are also, there are parts of us that can be subject to stress for whatever the reason. Someone has to be paying attention and asking and creating the space for and the opportunity for you to check. It's a health check, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is spotty. Some of it has been lost, but I see it in corners here and there that leads me to believe that it isn't a lost art completely. Okay. I will say though that the art of actually staying on top of it is in danger of disappearing unless someone like you just did ask the question, how do we keep this alive? How do we actually build a team that can thrive in this pressure environment that we find ourselves in? Did I answer your question, Veronica?
Yes, you did. And I know I'm inspired to, make that change such that the culture is much better all around.
Yeah.
And Dan, I think we've got Anthony that had a good question here that we haven't got to yet.
So I have Anthony Klein. I'm trying to, there you go. You're unmuted.
Hi, thank you again, Orlando.
Hi, Anthony.
My question just was, personally, how do you go about decompressing when you're feeling overloaded? And then, you kind of already answered it, but how you go about helping those when you really start to see it affecting their work and such.
Interesting, Anthony, two things. There's something I call shared interests. And shared interests come in multiple flavors. One may be, obviously, you all love the engineering, the science, the what have you in missions. There are opportunities for you to find out from your teammates, what do other things do they care about? Why do I bring this up? When I asked the question, part of the teams I was on, we learned that we all loved softball. So we joined a softball league, those of us that did. Some of us liked running, so we became running buddies. And when we had opportunities, sometimes late in the day, sometimes even on weekends, we would go out running together. And in those long runs, we would solve just about every problem the world ever had. So you look for shared interest where opportunities are provided for people to interact at a different level. And that actually created a decompression environment for me. We also, I mentioned the family several times, started to understand better the family environments that different people in the team were in. I mean, you don't need to get too personal about this, but at least you got to understand whether someone had 2 young children, whether they, in some cases, people were going through severe illnesses in the family, cancer, you name it. I mean, things that create part of life, right? But we would create an environment where people felt free to bring those things up and to understand that when someone was missing because they had to take the children to the doctor, so other of us were willing to step and help. while that person was out. This is why I brought up the example of, you know, two jobs. One, you got to make sure your job boss succeeds, because by definition, if he or she does, so will you. And the other is to have, you know, create an environment where others feel they can step in. They may or may not be able to do it the way you do it, but they will do it good enough until you come back, right? And learn in the process. So that, you know, I invite you guys to think in terms of shared interest. And shared interest is not only the project, but shared interest outside of you that provide opportunities for decompression. To me, they were hobbies. Running, you know, my family, obviously, then softball, etc. I hope I answered your question, Anthony.
I'm also seeing, again, some other good things also resonating with what you're talking about in the chat, Orlando. You know, the need to be transparent with your team, to let them support you and step in and say, you know, they can help, which they will. And it's just, you know, I think Veronica also just kind of said, you know, in after she said her question, she was thanked for a good question, and says, you know, I think once we are in the NASA workforce, which all of these people are absolutely dead on track for, in terms of being the replacements of the people that will be retiring soon, you know, they can make improvements on this kind of stuff in terms of the emotional side of exploration and how you actually optimize those teams. But it's through caring, it's through supporting each other, it's through communication and transparency. A lot of those things are going to do nothing but make NASA stronger.
By the way, these things don't happen by themselves, right?
Yeah.
The people of the team need to believe and be committed to creating that environment.
Well, and there's, go ahead.
I'll share an experience, because it happened on a team where one of the team members the person was very private, and they had a baby in the family, and the baby had been born with some heart issues, but he was not willing to share that. And what we did notice, however, that he had retracted, right? He wasn't the team member that he always was, and just cheerful. But we, people in respectful ways, were able to get him to open up. And I gotta tell you, I mean, the team became so embracing and empathetic of what was going on. And it meant so much to him when he actually was able to deal with this and come back. I mean, he was phenomenal. And it's creating that opportunity for people to be humans, right? In light of everything that we're doing that is so hard. I think it's terrific and very important.
Well, we're going to end with one question that we're going to just kind of do our finale on, if that's good for you. Yeah. And that's Wyatt. Let's go ahead and go to Wyatt. And I tell you what, this has been an especially timely topic, and I can't thank you enough, Orlando, for actually just hitting all of the really important places that a lot of students and ourselves always need to hear. So we appreciate that.
Wyatt actually had to step away,
okay.
So let's go with someone else.
Well, the question, and you know, mainly it was what excites you, and this has come up within others in terms of well, actually, I want to go to Astrid. I think that's going to kind of cap what we're talking about, and then maybe we'll do one last kind of finale overview of something else. Go ahead.
Okay, Astrid, you are up.
Is she unmuted?
Yeah, she is.
It's such a shock when all of a sudden your microphone goes live.
I know. It's like The Price is Right. You never know when they're going to call your name to go up on stage.
Come on down, Astrid.
Come on down. Okay. So let's try someone else then.
Well,
if you want to ask this question.
I just want to ask Wyatt's question because I think it's good. What excites you about space exploration of the future? Because you're looking at the future in all of these faces that we've got across here. You know, what excites you now that you've had that long view, Orlando, about what's to come?
I tell you, 2 weeks ago, I was at it's called Astro 2020 Legacy, and it is mission concepts of different sizes in preparation for the next astrophysics decadal. I bring this up because it can apply to other areas of what the NASA is doing and the world is doing. And I was able to be part of scientists and engineers presenting some of the most awe-inspiring concepts for missions, huge telescopes, search for planets, deep look into the evolution of the universe, the early stages of evolution. And actually, I was exposed to papers that demonstrated the computational and knowledge being brought to that computational environment to make simulations that allow people to predict the formation of galaxies and stars from primordial material. Here I am watching this and these conversations, by the way, with an incredibly and wonderfully diverse audience of men, women, culture, color, background, you name it. I couldn't believe it. I said, the future is bright from the contribution of so many people in such wonderful and magnificent concepts that I hope all of them get to see the light of day. I hear about now greater push to the moon and on to Mars, and what I hope is a sustaining effort to actually get it done. That to me is so inspirational. Right, and I said I fulfilled a lifelong dream when I joined NASA, and it's one that I continue to live. That's what inspires me to keep coming to this, because we are advancing so much, we're learning so much, and so fast that I hope we all can commit to this greater vision of good and peace. Right, rather than spending energy on war and fights and what have you, because we have tough problems to solve. Climate, you hear and read about it on the news, regardless of your political affiliation. There is irrefutable data that says something is going on and we better pay attention. And expanding beyond the Earth's environment we're bound to right now is just terrific. So that's what keeps me going, Sherry.
Well, and I hear you, and I think we have a lot to look forward to. But that's why I kind of called these all these folks here tonight is our brain trust going forward, in terms of being able to tackle not only the challenges but really break those barriers in so many directions. And space is going to be one of those frontiers that I think we're going to really have a chance to see and understand, and it's going to be through their efforts in all these directions that are going to be giving us hope for humanity and the future. Yeah. I know I'm hopeful when I see all of these folks in the room and all the kinds of things that they're doing. I think it's going to be a bright future. So anyway, we thank you. We know it's getting late for you and you've had a long day already. Thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation. Look forward to a future one.
Well, everyone's thanking you in the chat. So, and you've had a lot of call outs all night, Orlando, in terms of just your understanding and your vision, your experience, and being able to talk about the things that nobody ever talks about.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody.
We really appreciate it.
Best wishes to all of you.
All right.
Thanks, Orlando. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Good night, my friend.
Goodbye.
Good night. All right. Wow. I don't know about you, but I feel pretty spent just from thinking about all the emotion and things that you all are carrying as well. And I appreciate all of the honesty that I saw expressed in the chat tonight and in the questions. And you know what? We need to be real to each other. We can't just be pretending like everything's okay. Life is hard, and life has a lot of, as some of our other people have said it in prior sessions, it's got rough patches that we need each other. And I think that we can accomplish a lot more when we do have that transparency and the support, and for other people to see that we all go through struggles, and to recognize that and not, again, see that as a weakness, but actually as a strength when we're ready to call it out or to ask for help or to seek, advice or, you know, seek resources. I mean, I've been through counseling at work in terms of hitting something really hard in life, knocks you down. I can't tell you how much better it is to actually reach out and ask for the resources and the professional things that you have at your call, you know, in terms of at your universities or within other circles you may have, or being able to really, you know, sit down and talk with somebody and just get it out of your head and get it, saying it out loud a lot of times brings it into reality that it's not as dim and as dark as you think. But when you keep it all bottled up, it's easy to get there. So we're encouraging you again to think about self-care. This too shall pass in terms of the semester being over. You'll be hitting that, you know, a little bit more of a quiet stretch in terms of hopefully for summer. But pace yourself and don't be afraid to say, I need to slow down. I need to walk away. I need to just have some time to breathe. That's the healthy part. So we want to be here for you as well in terms of questions you have, but we also want you to be seeking, if you need it, local resources that you have. They're easy to find. If you don't know where to find them, ask us. We'll help you find them. Okay, that's just a laying out, you know, an obvious kind of wish we have for you. So the PDRs are going to be ours when you decide you want them to be ours. As easy as that. So we want you to pace yourself, and there is, you know, there is no particular quality line that you have to meet. We will give you feedback and help you get it to that optimal state. The main thing is, you know, we're rooting for you, and we want to be successful for you. We want to be supportive of you. So it's not about us, it's about you that we're actually having this project about. So, and thanks, Austin, you're doing again, you called out a really
Hey,
important thing in terms
Sherry, you're
of
cutting
counseling as
in
a
and
tool to
out a
help you
little
grow.
bit.
Just think of it as a life coach. Yep. Oh, I wonder if
I don't know if that's just for me or for everybody else, but okay. So yeah, so it's other people too. So do I sound okay? Can you guys see me? Okay, so yeah, it's a little Mad Maxy on your end, Sherry, but I just yeah, I echo what Sherry says as far as the PDRs are due when you want them to, when you're ready to turn them into us. You know, earlier in the chat, I said that this is really about the process, and a lot of you talked about you know, failing forward, and so don't even consider this necessarily a failure if you feel like you're you know, challenged by the PDR or feeling like you're not able to contribute what some of your teammates were. Every single process that you've experienced here is a growth process, an opportunity to really identify those things. Yeah, Sherry, maybe unplug your webcam and plug it back in. That might work. Kim says you're vomiting pixels.
Right.
Oh man. So anyway, it's, you know, it's again, somebody else in the chat said something about being vulnerable. You know, we were talking about this, Sherry and I, the other day, as far as you know, letting people know, kind of opening up and being transparent, even with where you're at in life and what you're experiencing at the time. It helps other people open up as well. Sometimes we see our fellow teammates or our classmates or our coworkers, and we think, man, that person has it all put together and never struggles at all, when that person probably does have their own challenges and struggles going on in life. And maybe if each of us shared those as well, I mean, it's something that will definitely help other people. So yeah, Sherry, you're pretty frozen. She's texting me here. So the haunted Sherry edition. So anyway, so yeah, we really, oh, there we go. She just came in. You're still in your office and you're here.
Oh well.
Yeah. So you all can hear her still, so you know, you can say anything.
Yeah. You just I'm saying good night. You all be well. Be in contact with us if you need anything. we're here, in terms of any questions you may have on your PDR or anything else. I hope I'm not going to stay frozen like that in my office.
Look, he's just like little silhouette. Yeah.
Who knows what happened? Anyway.
All right.
Thanks for coming in tonight. Be thinking about what Orlando said. He's one of the wisest people I know, not only in NASA but in life. He's really got a lot of wisdom to share. So you all be good, and we'll be in contact. Good night.
All right. So transitioning into just quick after show question answering, I saw something about the ambassador program. So I am going to publish that application, by tomorrow night. So Catherine, you are on if you'd like to just share a little bit more. And actually, Catherine, if you want to share a little bit about the science team meeting today. I was telling Corey how we were talking about how successful the Instagram takeover was, and he helped get us over 100 new followers. So that was awesome.
Yay. Yep. Yeah. So I got to share to the science team all of the awesome stuff that you guys have been working on, and they were very impressed. And lots of people were asking me like, oh, how do I follow them on social media? So hopefully you'll get a bunch of new followers from science team members too,
Awesome.
To really, see what you guys are all up to. And and so I'm very excited to get just have you guys start applying for the ambassador programs. There's so much, a lot of the science team meeting today was talking about, the details of how exactly do you get everything together to make sure when you're, have these super fast flybys to, make sure to get all of the science that you need and how do all the parts work together. And I was just sitting there thinking about how interesting this is, and how all the fun problems that we can, communicate with the general public about just how these kind of detailed orchestra that observations really are, and how everything, have these big groups of people just working together, all playing their parts, and then come out with this, incredible science on the other end. So it's going to be very exciting to have you guys part of that team. Is wonderful. We also got one of the interesting part of the science team meeting was actually very similar in ways to the talk that Orlando gave you tonight. It was a talk by historian Andrew Shakin on focusing on some of the big failures in NASA, in the Apollo 1 and the Challenger and Columbia disasters, and kind of what went wrong in those events, and how do you as a team work to prevent those type of disasters. And it really was make sure that you're in an environment where everyone is where no one feels like they can't speak up and and voice their concerns, because almost always somebody knows what's going wrong. They just don't feel empowered to say it, or they've said it and someone higher up in the chain wasn't listening. So it really is, success is breeding a culture where anyone can raise their hand and be like, wait, this doesn't seem right, or I didn't understand that, or hold off, we can't move forward right now. And that's the most important thing in being successful, is making sure that people have the ability to show their weaknesses and their vulnerabilities that we've been talking about tonight. So
now, team culture is really important, but it's it's changing, and I think this generation is going to actually make it change for much better. And a lot of you in the chat tonight have really kind of called that out. Mm-hmm. And Veronica, I'm calling you out for actually calling it out to say we're going to, be the ones to help make that change for the better. I think that's really important. So anyway, and go ahead, and you're going to unmute Bill.
Oh, yeah. So Bill, I'm looking for you here. I'm going to unmute you. and spotlight your video. So Bill in the chat mentioned that he went to a talk at his old community college about something like this. There he is. So, and he emailed me about this. So I said, I'll give you a couple minutes on the after show. So Bill, share with everybody.
So Jeff Wojtek, he's an engineer from Glenn Research Center. He actually worked with my mentor and everybody at my branch at Glenn. And he went to Prairie State College and gave a presentation about where NASA is going as far as how they changed the Deep Space Gateway program from when I worked on it last summer to what it's going to be in 2020. It has grown exponentially. And they're talking about how they're going to land on the moon and take off from there to go to Mars. And he went over about half the things that Orlando did tonight. Talked about the pressure of work at NASA, talked about the programs from the life cycle from beginning to end. He was a plethora of information, and it was amazing watching him give all of this information to students who knew nothing about what NASA does or even the programs that they could apply to go to any NASA center in the United States. It was amazing. It really was.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Well, any other questions that you might have in terms of, I know there was something here about emailing Dan to find out about the Instagram takeover.
Instagram takeovers, even though your session is coming to an end, we still want to keep that going. It's really great to see what your campuses look like, what you're doing when you're meeting with your teams as we transition into the next academy, which somebody asked about that so Mo's asking as well. So your Proposal Review Academy, which is what we're calling it. We're not calling it Level 2, calling it the Proposal Review Academy. The application is currently available on our website, and with the numbers of students that are in your group, plus our current Level 2 students that will also qualify to participate in this, we're anticipating a completely full session. So get your application in right away, because at the end of the weekend, we'll actually give you through the weekend. On Sunday or Monday, we're going to start putting this out publicly, because you're not going to be required, or new students will not be required to take this particular session in order to qualify for the Proposal Review Academy. So we're going to open that up to the public, but we only have 500 slots, maybe a couple less than that, 500 slots for you. So if you want a chance to do this, now is the time to apply, and we'll give you through the weekend. We know you're busy, so we'll give you a chance to do that. It's on our lspace.asu.edu, and I'll share that here in the chat.
And Kevin, yes, we will still give priority to the people that have been through the mission concept, even in the fall and going forward. So if you can't take it in summer, go ahead and apply for it in the fall. There's a waiting list already for people that are interested. There's an interest list that you can get into for the fall. The other question I saw coming up about outreach opportunities, and that's really what Catherine's talking about. Apply to be a Lucy ambassador, because you get the Lucy slides, you get all the talking points, you get the updates, you become an official representative of Lucy. And we are going to take applications, and we do want to kind of look at the possibilities in terms of reaching audiences and things like that. This is a really great program that we're just going to be opening up shortly. So be watching for that. And Dan's putting in the thing for
I'll just share. So last Friday, if you go back to your LaSpace emails from last Friday, when I sent you the link for the application for the Proposal Academy, there's also a second link, an optional button. If you want to be put on the wait list or the interest list for the fall, click that button, type in your name and email, and we will contact you as soon as the application is available. So you're getting a heads up notice ahead of time. And Austin, you're about to get unmuted. You're about to join the after show.
This is so much more efficient.
It is, yeah. Austin, you're up. Is he there? Hold on. Austin, are you there?
Just ask a question, so I thought it might be. Thought the ambassador was for the Lucy program itself. It is for the Lucy mission. It's a mission ambassador that actually gives talks about the Lucy mission out to the Trojans. So that's what that type of outreach is talking about. Did Did you guys have a different type of outreach that I've seen come through here a little bit more? If there is, put it in the chat and we'll be able to catch it. But this is a very special opportunity to where, and Catherine will be putting that information out. We have the application ready to go. Dan's going to go ahead and publish it on the website. It's a great way for you to be able to, around your community and the other opportunities that you have, to be able to actually tell people the story about what's going to be going on within the Lucy mission. And I think, Catherine, we heard the team meeting today, really how important this mission is. And you can unmute Catherine if you would too.
Catherine can unmute herself.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, being able to, tell the story about, how this, this mission in many ways is kind of covering some of the missing pictures between our understanding about the outer solar system and, the inner solar system. We're really looking at these leftovers, which are kind of a key part of what our early solar system was like. So these are fossils left over from the early solar system, left over from the, possibly the type of stuff that was forming the giant planets in the outer solar system, and have now been, strapped in this environment, in this very unique environment in these Trojan points for billions of years. And now finally we get this opportunity to go visit them, and we're not visiting one or two, we're visiting 7 different objects on this tour. So it really will allow us to get a pretty amazing picture about what our early solar system was like.
I love the thing that was said today. I think it was Tom Stadler that said 1 spacecraft, 7 asteroids.
Yeah.
We've got a lot that we're going to, out of that 1 spacecraft, that we're actually going to get to see that are in very different places. So it's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, and to answer Kevin's questions, the ambassadors will get all of the materials for the talks, so they'll get presentations, and as well as stuff to, if they want to print out 3D models of the spacecraft, or other paper models if they don't have access to a 3D printer, all sorts of things like that to be able to tell the story and of the Lucy mission.
Okay, and so we're going to be working on that. More information to come, and Kevin, reach out to us as well, just to kind of close the loop there. To Jesse, who says if you're going to be in a summer program and you want to continue on in the summer La Space Academy, you just want to make sure that you'll have the time to actually work on the proposal. If it'd be like a full-time job if you're doing an internship. But you want to make sure that you'll have time to work on the Proposal Academy as well, because it's actually going to have you learning to write and writing a proposal. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to actually flip that over and be on the review side and reviewing other proposals the way NASA would. You're going to learn so much about what it takes to really develop an idea and make it selectable and fundable. And that's the whole premise of why this is being done. It gets you ready and poised to learn the ropes on how to get those ideas and how to be contributive to proposals that are going in for NASA as well. So you don't necessarily have to write it all yourself and be the principal investigator, but you can learn how all the sections need to be written, and maybe again you're contributing towards an idea and helping to make it real within a team environment as well. So it's an amazing opportunity. I hope you all take part and really think about going in, if not this summer, next fall. So I would look at your schedules, Kevin, and say when when you're going to be having that discretionary time to be able to do that learning as well. Or Jesse. Yeah, thank you. Dan's keeping me straight here.
And actually, Jess is going to be here with us.
I know.
So, but
how hard are we going to work here, I guess?
Well, but I mean, again, if you're doing anything over the summer, specifically an internship that you're going to be working 9 to 5 every day, Monday through Friday, just like you'll have a regular job, you know, you'll have the evening to work on the academy and your weekends. So depending on how you want to spend that time, you know, you'll have other interns around you as well that might not be participating in this, and so it's up to you. But you can also do the fall as well. I mean,
Well, and but when I ran the internship program across, you know, all the centers, people would ask us, "Do you mind if I take a class or two during the summer while I'm doing my internship?" And we always advised, no. You really want to focus in on what it is you're doing. Now, the folks that have the 5-week internships here at ASU, you know, that might be negotiable, especially since we'll be
well,
running
and
the
it's 5
academy.
weeks.
It's 5 weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, we can talk about that, but I do want to make sure that people know there will be work involved, but you will learn amazing stuff in terms of the outcome. So, and then somebody's going to be, you know, walking away with an award that's going to actually help push their things forward. That's whole the good part about NASA's investing in this as well. All right. Well, I'm sure Olivia would like to see her mom, the baby. So, and I know you've had a long day because I've been up since 7 my time, and I know you've been at the meeting since 8 your time.
Yeah.
Tomorrow morning to go, or tomorrow as well. So
Yeah.
we want to thank you all for staying with us tonight. We really, I know I feel like this was a very healthy kind of exposure to the things we need to be, you know, thinking about internally is in terms of our own well-being and how you're managing and what you need to do to be able to, you know, be well. And that's really our bottom line.
Yeah, Miguel has a question. So Miguel, you're unmuted.
Thanks, Dan. Great pick on Orlando tonight. He was so great, and what you guys have talked to us about has been really informative and reassuring. But I just wanted to know do we have a game plan with the presentations? Are the presentations in stone, or are they debatable? I don't know.
Well, I mean, we'd like as you're submitting your PDRs, and so if your team has decided to take another week to complete that, you can submit your presentation at that time as well. It would be nice for you to kind of vocalize your PDR and kind of explain that and have that practice of being able to present what your thoughts and ideas are.
This is a minimum or maximum of
10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Yeah, so no more than 10 minutes at all. And so again, it's really just, you can open up Zoom, click record, and share your screen just like we do here every week. Share your presentation, and each team member can just take turns talking.
And recognizing that if you can't corral everybody to do it, we know that that's reality as well.
Not everybody needs to be a part of that.
Just as many as you can. If you can get a time where people can do it and they just each have a slide or two to kind of pitch in, it really does help add, you know, the voices and show the dimensions of the team working on it. But again, it's the best you can do. It's your practice. We get the benefit of being able to have a little bit more. And the reviewers from the last PDR did go and watch the video because it did help explain some things maybe as they're reading through the PDR. There were some nuances there that were really helpful. So they always.
I know I watched some of the last session's PDRs on YouTube. That helped.
We heard that. Yeah, we heard that some of them were on YouTube. We didn't even know that. We didn't know that they were out on YouTube available. So that's really cool.
Something every day.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I mean, if those help you, then definitely, you know, check those out. So some of you have asked for samples of what these PDRs look like, and while we can't give those samples out quite yet, you can actually watch those videos, and that'll help.
Thank you.
We're hoping to have some PDRs that actually are going to be good examples that we can hold up, you know, going forward for teams to be able to see. Just like, you know, sometimes it's their good ideas, and it's proprietary. You don't want to give out all your good stuff, but we're hoping at a PDR level that we can get some of the teams to be located and share.
Yeah.
And I think that
right.
Yeah.
So, and that's, as a reviewer, that's on the next academy, the Proposal and Review Academy. It's amazing how much you learn about how to propose by reading everybody else's proposals.
Yep.
It's like, dang, I wish I'd have done that. Or look how they pulled that out. Look how they used that graphic or that table. Wow. And you file that away, to be able to be used in terms of not copying what they did, but that aspect of how they actually made their things stand out and how
Right,
they,
a different perspective.
Yeah.
it gives you a whole different perspective. That's why in your early careers and where you are now as an undergrad, having the chance to be able to do this proposal review stuff is unbelievable. To have that under your belt early, getting ready to launch in your career, having that on your resume is a big deal. So anyway, we hope that, does that answer your questions?
Yes, yes, it did. Thank you.
And we hope you guys have some fun in terms of doing the PDR presentation. It's kind of like your culmination. So anyway.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you for asking. Thanks for raising your hand. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
And just Bo mentioned Sonny. I just talked to him this week. He sent me a text of him sitting in the real mission control room because NASA was shooting a video that's going to be on NASA TV. I think it's the 19th. We'll post it on Trello. That they're going to highlight, bringing more people into STEM and some of the things. So he said it was pretty weird sitting at the console he won't be at for another 2 years, but it, I think he's a great, kind of representative for that. So it'll be a good video. So anyway, he's doing well, passes on his hellos to everybody. And I think there's a lot to look forward to where you're all going to be in those kinds of positions not too long in the near future. So,
All right, everyone. Well, it was
our hats off to you.
another great session. Feels like it was therapy or either therapeutic. We go home and just relax now. But no, we're extremely proud of the work that you've all done, the dedication you put in, the time that you set aside to even just come to these sessions weekly and engage the way you do, and just continuing to progress in your work. Just because the session's ending next week doesn't mean that your PDR can't continue to be evolved. Doesn't mean that, also like Sherry said earlier, you're stuck with this. You're La Femme. We want to know you forever. So
It's kind of like you told somebody last week, we're the crazy aunt and uncle.
Yeah. Crazy aunt and uncle.
So anyway, we do want to stay in touch after we're done here. Hopefully we'll see you in the next session, but if not, please keep updated. We want to keep you in we want to keep you in the in the know in terms of upcoming events or also talks that the science team will be doing. We want to be able to give you the links for any other future talks after you've graduated. And we hope that you apply for the ambassadors. I think it would be so much fun it would be amazing for Lucy to be able to get the likes of you in terms of some of their representatives. So it'll be a great time. And the launch, October 2021.
Yep.
We want to be working towards that. Get that little savings account set aside or whatever you got to do, to get to Florida. And I know every hotel there, from having run so many launch conferences, that we'll find some space and be pointing people to get some good things going in terms of the launch.
And you can keep applying for Lucy internships as well. Next summer, the summer after, you're in. So we appreciate y'all and we value you, and we absolutely love the work that we do, and being able to get to know you all better is great. And we're always here for you. And we say that with just complete sincerity. Like, we don't just mean that we're here for you. Don't email us or don't call us. We're really here for you. Send us, messages, call us. We've got our office lines. Sherry's cell number is 480.
215-0410.
There you go. Boom. And you all have mine. Every email you get from me has my cell number too. So, well, anyway, so we will see you next week. Email us if you want an extension with 0 penalty. By the way, a couple of you have asked. No judgment, no penalty. We're looking forward to seeing your PDRs and just helping you get through it. But we'll see you guys next week.